The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 52. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona. This is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria, and today I am joined by the absolutely lovely Angelique Rewers, who is the CEO and founder of The Corporate Agent. She's been called the undisputed champion at helping small businesses land big clients by Inc. magazine. And she's successfully navigated all sides of the corporate buying table for over 2 decades, and we'll kind of get into that background. It's a fascinating one. Angelique and her team have taught more than 4,500 consultants, coaches, experts, and other entrepreneurs across 72 countries how to secure 5, 6, and even 7-figure corporate contracts. Angelique was named Enterprising Women of the Year by Enterprising Women magazine, has been featured at Huffington Post, Forbes, Lucky, Washington Post, Entrepreneur, CBS, and tons more. She has shared the stage with Hollywood Steve Harvey, Shark Tank's Damon John, marketing guru Seth Godin, and NFL Super Bowl champ Jamal Lewis. She has built her company on the belief that business and not governments change the world. And when socially conscious entrepreneurs are empowered to help transform larger companies from the inside out, the positive ripple effects are just beyond measure. So, Angelique, welcome to the show. We're so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. It's good to see you. We believe so much in the work that you do, so it's always great when we can connect with someone who's doing the same type of work that we're doing in terms of empowering these experts out there to really make a difference.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really love about the work you're doing, Angelique, and we want to talk about this specifically, is you're kind of opening up this angle that I think a lot of small business owners would never have thought they could sort of cross this threshold of selling into corporates. Why do you think this doesn't sort of show up on their radar screen initially?
You know, one is a lot of myths that get, just repeated out there. You know, this idea of, oh, it takes so long to get an opportunity with corporate, and you've got to be this big company with all this scale. And there's just a lot of myths and misconceptions on one side. And then I think the other side is because it does seem intimidating when you think about it. You're thinking, oh my gosh, these are big brands. They have all this money. They have all this power. They have all these people that work for them. What could I possibly, bring into this organization? Why would they ever work with me? And they must already have people that they're working with. So there's this whole story that people start to tell themselves about it. And it's sad because, they miss out on all this opportunity to have impact in the world.
Well, and I was going to say the opportunity of working with some of these larger corporations and getting in and doing some big work that I think people underestimate the potential. I've heard you talk about this where people kind of go from this, they're charging $100, working with small businesses, and suddenly when they're in corporates, these are $150,000 contracts in some cases.
My gosh, it's complete. I mean, so first of all, you've got like this massive amount of money that's out there. You've got $12.7 billion being spent on coaching. You have about $256 billion being spent on consulting. You have $364 billion being spent on employee training programs, right? So just crazy amounts of money. And that doesn't even get into like the products they're buying at like $12 trillion. So yeah. We're talking just crazy amounts of money. That's number one. And then number two is once you get into it, you realize that, like, in fact, I just interviewed one of my clients today on this very thing. So I'll use this exact thing. She just finished a year in one of our programs, and She said, Angelique, when I first came to you, I said that I had this program that I wanted to use to empower women because, you know, women's voices aren't being heard inside of organizations. They don't have a seat at the table. They're leaving organizations. And I want to sell this program and I want to get, you know, 100 women into this program or whatever. And I'm like, why are you going to do it that way? To get 100 women into that program on your own, you're going to need to build a list of thousands of people. You're going to have to create what we call the Willy Wonka mobile of online marketing, you know, because you need a million Oompa Loompas. You need all these Oompa Loompas, and you've got all these gears on there, and they're putting in the double bubble cola in the back. And then when you finally open her up, it goes 1 mile an hour and foam goes everywhere. And you're like, what the hell? You know? And so, so I'm like, don't do that. Take your program into these companies, let them pay you for the program and put 100 people inside each company, you know, into your program. She just took her company to mid 6 figures. So like right in that mid, like, you know, not quite, you know, right between $1 million and zero, right? Like, you know, close to that $500,000-$600,000 place. And she did it rapidly because she sold major brands on her program. Yeah. And then they're putting all their people in there, and it's a lot less work and headache. And it's, you know, she's getting her work into the world in a big, big way. So, you know, for me, I just think people really overlook this. And it doesn't even have to be the big brands, Frank. I mean, every day you're running your errands in your backyard and you're driving past companies with 100 people here and 200 people there. Right. And, you know, they need experts like you too.
Yeah, it's true. We tend to forget that, you know, the real world, you know, we get stuck in the internet world. Yeah. I love your analogies. And I still, to this day, like credit you when I talk about the internet marketing blender, because you coined that term. And I remember one of the events that you were at, you talked about that. Yeah, it's crazy. But we sort of are in this insulated bubble of what we think business is. And it's true. You like rent, you know, there's a construction company down the road that has like 400 employees or whatever. And we're not thinking about what we can do for those. Another thing that you've mentioned before, I'd love for you to chat a little bit about, is that some of these corporations, especially some of the larger ones, have actually set aside money for small business engagements. Talk to us a little bit about that. What's that all about?
It's big. So, you know, and in fact, I just got back from presenting at a conference with AT&T, and in a few weeks I'm presenting with AT&T and Time Warner at another conference, because, you know, these companies are out there speaking to small business owners, and, you know, because the work I do, I've kind of showed up on their radar. And so it's kind of talking from both sides of the table, which is always really fun. And the thing is that these big companies want to work with small business owners for a few reasons. Number one, we're really good for business. Like, we're really good for business. We have a client right now who's working with all the major, you know, tech companies, social media companies out there, small company, and they are just getting in there with those teams, bringing them insights that, you know, frankly, the other big companies are just not capable of having. Yeah. On the same level. Fast, nimble, responsive, good for the bottom dollar because we have way lower overhead. You know, I mean, think about Accenture's overhead or IBM Global Services overhead versus, you know, a small, you know, 3-person, 5-person team. So, you know, we're really good for business. And then also there is this, I don't know if you saw this or not, Frank, but essentially one of the most powerful lobbying organizations from like the corporate space just came back out and said, you know what, companies can't be all about the bottom line. It isn't shareholder first. We have to completely look at our impact on society first. And so now there's also this really strong push to work with women-owned business owners, minority business owners, veteran business owners, LGBTQ business owners, disabled business owners, disadvantaged business owners, and in a way that isn't any longer just about meeting some quota, but realizing that by having those voices represented, you don't have companies going out there and missing their voice not resonating, because the voice of these companies has to resonate. You know, buyers today of both, I don't care if you're a B2B customer or you're a consumer, when you buy products and services, you want a degree of authenticity there. And so it's about a lot, but they set aside tremendous amounts of money specifically to work with small business owners, women business owners, veteran business owners. And even if they haven't set aside money to buy your particular product or service, those same people are great champions for you inside the company to make the introductions. And then you can create that advocacy framework inside the organization. You have people really fighting for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see that announcement, and I was fascinated by it because it's sort of a game changer to move away from this sort of profit and a much more socially conscious, mindset about buying and about buying services from small businesses like us, as well as what their impact on the world would be. That's going to be I think that's going to be a game changer. Let's address sort of the big elephant in the room for corporate sales, which is this: how do you even get access? Like, I think a lot of small business owners are thinking, well, the reason I don't do this is because I don't know anyone in this space. I don't know how you would do this. The Wonkamobile sounds awful, but it's the only thing I know. So how do you break through that and crack into some of these larger corporations?
Yeah. So the first thing we say to people is, look, if you want to sell to organizations, you're going to have to solve a problem for them, right? Like you're going to have to say, what problem am I solving? And they only have 4 kinds of problems. They have people problems, process problems, product problems, and profit problems, right? So you got people, process, product, and profit, and they all lead to the next one. So like the people create the process problems, then the processes create bad products, whether that's a service or a product, and then that of course leads that. So you've got to figure out, like, where am I going? But then from there, you have 3 riddles that you have to solve, and you should write these down. But you have 3 riddles. You have to ask yourself, number 1, how am I going to have enough right decision makers to talk to? Because they're not buying your info product off your website. So you're going to have conversations with these people. So how am I having enough right decision makers to talk to is number 1. Number 2, how do I get them to want to talk to me? Because none of us want to be a salesperson. None of us want to be like constantly calling and harassing and being that like used salesman and like, showing up their office, banging on their door. Nobody wants that. Everyone, like, you want to be invited in. So how do you get them to want to talk to you? And then the third problem you have to solve is, how do you make sure you're always having the right conversations at the right time with the right people? So those are the 3 things. If you can crack the code on those 3 problems, then you can sell to these companies until the cows come home. And the first question is, how do you have enough of the right decision makers to talk to? And most people are playing, even if they're in this space, Frank, most people are playing in like a petri dish size pool of prospects. The way that you get to them is through proximity. You cannot do this through cold outreach. It's miserable to do this through cold outreach. If you basically want to feel really depressed and unsuccessful, then do this through cold outreach. Or worse, do it through inbound. Focus on, social media posts and, things that attract them to you. And then, wonder where all your clients are because they're all in meetings and conference calls and they don't have time to read your newsletter.
Right. Or attend your 2-hour webinar. Yeah.
Exactly. So you really do this through proximity, but today you don't have time to go out and really create this on your own. So you have to leverage centers of influence. You have to leverage industry associations, trade associations, the big conferences, the business journals, the trade publications. And, they're all just as desperate to have their funnel full of great content and great expertise because that's the business that they're actually in. So their subscribers and their members, they have to continuously fill that pipeline of great content and great expertise. So you really have to do it through those organizations. If you wait for them to find you, you're going to be at that median number of $44,000 a year or less. And that's top line. That's sad. And that's where we have about 85% of self-employed experts out there. So that's sad. So you've got to do it through the proximity. You've got to get face-to-face, even through virtual stuff like this where there's video. where you can do virtual executive roundtables with these groups and things, but you have to have proximity. And then you also can leverage strategic introductions. I think, Frank, people just, oh my gosh, the missed opportunity of not thinking about who they know to get just a one-off introduction to the right person is just a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because there's so much discussion of LinkedIn, right? And how to leverage LinkedIn, and do you do these automated outreach messages, and are you connecting with a million people? And people forget that when LinkedIn started, the big feature was that you could find somebody else and see if you were connected to them. It's like we've forgotten that function.
The linked part in the LinkedIn, right? Exactly. But it's something else though that you say about the LinkedIn thing, because I get into this discussion, and I want to say this because I have a lot of friends who are in that LinkedIn space where that's the service they sell.
Yeah.
And I think there's a time and a place for some of those strategies. I do. Sure. There's always a time and place for every strategy. And I mean no disrespect to those individuals. But the thing that I wish that experts would understand about their marketing choices that they use is that if you kind of can picture yourself doing this awesome, amazing engagement with a client. I mean, we have a client who just got that as part of her work with a really innovative company, a company that was so innovative, they were just on the cover of a major magazine. They brought her in to this executive retreat that they paid her for, that she got to create from scratch because she's just wants to unleash, collaboration and bigger thinking, the stuff that, she just makes her heart just, beat fat, every day. And it was in Alaska. She got to go to Alaska, and she got to, go on fishing trips with them. And this is all paid in addition to her professional fees. I mean, it was wow. A trip of a lifetime. And so I think about an engagement like that, right? Where this is a dream engagement and a dream client, everything was exactly how she would want it. You have to remember that awesome project started way back. If you follow the breadcrumb trail, all the way back to the very first moment that she connected with that organization, and how that first interaction went, and then how she got to a conversation with them, and then how she shaped that conversation, and how she shaped what her journey with this client was going to look like, and how it started with a gateway and then grew and grew and grew. That's all connective tissue. It's the ankle bone is connected to the knee bone is connected to the elbow. It's all one journey. Right. And the problem with a lot of those LinkedIn strategies and things like that is, if that's your starting point, you actually don't end up with some of those dream opportunities, because the first point of contact from that first cold generic outreach put you on a different trajectory with that client. And it's very hard to recover from that. Yeah. And that's kind of a big concept to understand, but it's just so important strategically to think about what you're doing in your business.
Well, it's transactional. It feels very transactional rather than relationship oriented. On that point, one last thing is, because I do want to pivot to talk about how you're working with folks, but so much especially in the internet marketing space, so much of this conversation about it's a numbers game. And I feel like in the corporate marketing space, that just isn't a good strategy. It really does have to be about targeted, intentional, relationship-oriented conversations.
Yeah. Seth Godin said something recently. I spoke at an event and he spoke at an event, and I really appreciated what he said. And he was talking about how the world is really moving to these micro communities, just because of the way that we can filter out so much of the information and where we spend our time, and everything is getting so specialized to our interests and our needs because of data and AI and everything else. And he's like, look, and we've been saying this for a long time. We just didn't kind of say it through the same lens he's looking at it. But, when you go into the corporate space, there's too much opportunity. I mean, I listed off almost $700 billion in opportunity that's out there, right? So there's too much opportunity. So it's not a numbers game. It's not about throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. It's about choosing a pond to play in and then go own that freaking pond. Like, go own the pond. So be strategic, decide this is where I'm going to play, go play where no one else is playing. And I'm not talking about blue ocean, because that's a terrible idea for getting started and working in corporate. You want purple ocean, not blue ocean. Yeah. But, go where no one else is and own that pond and be very intentional in those relationships. And, when we have a client, like one of our clients, I know you talk about the 6 to 7 figure thing. We have a client who, basically in about 13 months went from in the $100,000 a year, it was like 140, something like that a year, to 900 and some $1,000 in 1 year, and did not kill herself doing that. Yeah. And did not spend half of that on Facebook ads, I might add. So it wasn't like she spent 800,000 on Facebook ads to make 900,000. And I'm only saying that slightly sarcastically.
No. I've already made that joke several times myself.
Okay, so I'm like, what are you doing?
There's a whole bunch of Facebook ad experts who have blocked me now for that.
Oh, no. And listen, I love my Facebook experts, but I just think you have to be realistic about it,
Totally.
But, you've got, you do that by playing in a pond and really owning that pond and building those relationships, because typically one client, if you're doing this right, one client is going to, there's really no reason to ever have a corporate client. Please hear me on this, guys. There's no reason to have a corporate client that's not spending on the small side $100,000 a year with your company. What are you doing if you have a B2B client that's not spending $100,000 a year with you? And think about it, you have 5 of those, that's $500,000. You have 10 of those, you're at $1 million, and it's so doable.
Yep. That's great insight. I love that. I could preach that all day, but let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to the stuff, the work you're doing, because you actually work with small business owners to find these corporate engagements, and mentor them through the process of becoming essentially a corporate service provider. Walk us through that process. How do you typically work with people to help them make that shift?
Yeah, we cracked the code on this a few years ago. In my first years of doing it, every year we'd have a 1-year mastermind. We kind of used some of the models that were out there, and something felt a little off to us in that model. So a few years ago, we really changed the way we work with small business owners, and it just made all the difference in the world for them. So the first thing we did here was say to ourselves, there is a big difference between training and strategy. And training is great on demand, and it's great continuous, and it's foundational, and everybody has to have the same training on certain things to sell to corporate. And it's not just that superficial level. I mean, it's got to go into those 10-degree shifts that go from checking a box to speaking at an event to going to an event and coming out with $500,000 in business, those kinds of things. So we created a training program called Velocity, and it's a lifetime program. And the reason we did that is because this is not a short game. When you can win clients very quickly, actually, but ultimately, you want to have these clients for years. If you land GE, you want them working with you for a decade, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So we wanted a lifetime program to do that. So we separated that out. We created an online training program called Velocity, where we have Q&A calls and things like that. But it's got this amazing, we call it the Velocity Vault, with all the trainings and the templates and that foundational stuff. And then people come into that, and then they can stay in that as their business grows, and as we update and add new content, our virtual intensives and all that. And that really takes care of the training and the foundational piece. And then separately from that, Frank, what we did is we said, the selling to the corporate, you can't have a pat answer. If somebody asks you a question and they've got a big opportunity in front of them, they really need some deep support. So we created cohorts. And so we have platinum cohorts and an elite cohort. And then those are really small. So I only work personally with 8 business owners a year, 8. because my clients at that level, I'm helping them, with deals that, one of our clients recently landed a multi-7-figure engagement. It's going to be over multi-years, multiple continents. I mean, I was on a Saturday going through this, proposal with her and like doing like 20 pages of math on things with her, that's like, I can't do that for 200 people.
No, definitely not.
So I work with my elite groups, and then Phil, who's my EVP, he works with our platinum groups, which are people who are really trying to go from like getting to 6 figures or to that $500,000 mark. And then when they're at a $500,000 mark, they can come, work with me, or we do private, strategy work, but we really separated out, like, this is the strategy versus like, this is all your how-to stuff that you need access to. And so that's really how we broke it up. And it's been phenomenal for people because they know they're never leaving our community. And that's the other piece of it that I think is so important. When you're selling in the B2B space, as big as it is, it's actually really small in a way. And so our community, they bench for one another all the time. So, one of our clients just landed this amazing global opportunity, and she went right into our community and was like, I need experts in these 5 areas. And she pulled them off the bench and put them in her game. And so that's
such a game-changing strategy that I think a lot of business owners haven't even thought about. Yeah. And I've heard you talk about it before, and it's like, I think for so many people to be able to walk in and think about, okay, well, the business that I wanted to work with has to solve problems I don't know how to solve. Yeah. And before thinking about that strategy, they probably would have walked away from the deal and just said, that's not me. That's not us. We're too small.
Because there's that intimidation factor of, I don't have that. And then it's like, how am I going to find it? Because that's time consuming, right? That's a time consuming thing. So people just go right into the network, and they know that everybody in our community has gone through the same training. They all understand the same lingo. They all understand really how you serve a client. And so we have a very high standard of that community. And so they feel really confident going in there, grabbing those folks, and then putting them in. And that's the analogy. I'm a sports fan. So I think about, the basketball team that has the second string on the bench, and then you're pulling them into the game when you need them. That is, and that's how people are also able to open doors, get strategic introductions. We have people landing major speaking opportunities. In fact, one of our clients just got a huge speaking opportunity because another member of the community was invited to speak at a conference, was already speaking at another major conference, and said, I know another expert in this area. He's amazing. He went there, and then he landed 2 clients. So that community for us is, there's gold in that community. And
that's a valuable network asset. The other thing I'd say is, so you've done a really good job as you're describing it. And of course, I know a little bit about your business directly, so I can speak to a little bit of it. The scalability you've created with velocity, with the content that you do, the templates that you have. I think a lot of people try to do that in their business. They'll have lessons and training and things, but and I know you didn't bring this up, but I think it's worth mentioning. The content you have, the templates that you have, they are like gold in and of themselves. Like I've snuck a peek at some of this stuff, so I know what you're doing. Like the email templates, the outreach templates you do, I've seen your, we talked a little bit about having an executive roundtable, how you lay out that process. You've got the detail to actually allow people to execute on this. And I think a lot of folks in our industry are kind of used to training being a little mealy mouthed and kind of soft skill stuff. And you've cracked the code. I think when you say you guys have cracked the code, it's obvious when you look at the templates because you're actually able to implement off of that.
Yeah, we really, I think, so we've got really clear about 5 years ago on what we wanted our brand promises to be. We were really influenced by the scaling up world and and that whole idea of what we wanted brand promises to be. One of the things I said right away about our brand promises was that I wanted to curate big business experiences for the small business owner. And, I came out of corporate. I was a corporate decision maker. I wasn't in procurement, which no slight to procurement, but I was like an actual corporate decision maker because we were on the business side. I was working directly with the CFO, the CIO, the CEOs, like helping them make their decisions on experts we were bringing.
Only people who have actually sold to corporate get that joke.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not procurement. And so, I hired hundreds and hundreds of outside experts, didn't hire hundreds. And I was also doing business development in the corporate world. So, when I'm at Northrop Grumman, I'm working, as we're going out there building, engagements with the government and things. So when I created the content that we created in Velocity, I have a very high standard. I mean, I am, the nice way that people say it about me, which I appreciate that they're gender neutral on this, is that I'm exacting, that I'm an exacting individual. It's a nice way of calling me a control freak. But here's the thing though, Frank, and I think I've been so pissed off over the years when I've made investments in things and I get it. And I'm like, this is a joke. Like, what would you get this free on the internet?
Right.
And so I just think business owners deserve better than that. And also when you're selling to B2B organizations, you've got to take your business seriously. The devil's in the details. And, we want our client. I really do believe that business owners are what change the world. We have a whole new life cycle to employees today. People leave companies when they have that sort of conscious awakening, and then they leave, but they have this opportunity to go back in and transform these companies. And I want them to have the tools to do it, but we have cracked the code. I appreciate you mentioning it. And we take a lot of pride in what we've done with this. And we're always trying to make it better. It's something that, I work a lot because I care about it a lot.
Well, I never would have used the phrase exacting to describe you, but I will testify that you have a very high bar for quality. I remember an event you did out in Scottsdale a couple of years ago. It is, to me, still the high bar, the high watermark for events. You put on quite an impressive event, and I don't mean that just from a showy perspective.
Thank you.
It was very well executed. So I know, and again, you and I know each other, but we've kind of looked at the content you've got, and you have the specifics out there. And I think that's a really good lesson for anyone who's listening to this as they're putting their own stuff together, is that the bar is kind of high for putting your own program content together. And as much opportunity as there in corporate, you can't go into a corporate engagement half-assed. Like you really do have to have your stuff together. They'll eat you up and spit you out. They'll sometimes eat you up and spit you out even when you have your stuff together. I remember I had a contract with JP Morgan Chase for a while, and man, those guys will eat you up.
Oh yeah, the financial groups. I mean, they can be really, really challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. A tip I know a lot of your listeners, a lot of the folks who follow you want to create that scale in their business. And there was a time where I kept sort of failing at that because I had this idea. Well, I watched what other people were doing, and I kept trying to think like, oh, you have to have these steps. You have to have these steps. You have to have these steps. And, depending on what you're doing, like what your expertise is and your teaching, not everything is exactly sequential. Different people are starting at different places. Different pieces are going to fit together differently. And once I kind of blew up this idea that when you create a scalable, program and you're building that scale and you want it to have endurance, lasting power, and not have to constantly, so LinkedIn made a change, and so now I have to blow up this, or Facebook ads made a change, so now I have to change my system that I'm teaching. You really want to think in terms of a system of systems. You want your programs, if you're trying to scale them, to have some flex in them and not build, some program that the second you realize you're missing something, now the whole system's out of whack. And I think once I figured that out, it made it a lot easier to teach what we were teaching. And more importantly, Frank, to teach people how to think.
Yeah.
right? Because if you're out there looking for a program that, you don't have to do any thinking, you probably are going to get a mediocre result. So you want to look for people who teach you how to do strategic thinking and realize when and how to apply certain strategies to get the results you want, because everything you do in your business is a tennis match. When you hit that ball over the net, you don't know how it's going to come back. So if you're flipping through a notebook going, well, now what do I do? Now what do I do? What you need to be able to do is say, okay, let me understand what's happening, why it's happening, and then I can go to the right strategy now to fix that thing in my business. When you take that kind of approach, you're suddenly at a whole new level of sort of entrepreneurial maturity. And I think that gets overlooked in the small business space.
Absolutely. Strategy over tactics. I couldn't agree more.
Always.
Absolutely. Angelique, unfortunately, we are out of time, and I know you're super busy. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. This has been amazing. I hope that anyone who's listening to this, who's in the B2B space, who hasn't considered corporate, is considering it now. I've spent a lot of time in this area, and I know the opportunities are there. And I will tell you, Angelique and her team have literally cracked this code. They really know what they're doing. So thanks so much. Last question for you, Angelique. For those folks who are listening that feel inspired now to maybe go in this direction, what's a great way for them to connect with you and your team or to get started down that path?
That's awesome. We actually set up a special link for your community, Frank. So it's the corporateagent.com/Frank Bria. So thecorporateagent.com/Frank Bria. And there you will find a killer resource to help you envision exactly what those $100,000 engagements look like. There's a resource with 7 different $100,000 packages. If you are already working with corporate, you want to look at those because you're probably missing some offerings that you could add to what you're doing. If you're just getting started, it's going to take that mystery out of what the hell am I selling? So it's a great resource at thecorporateagent.com/Frank Bria.
Thanks. That's amazing. We've got that link here below the video if you're on YouTube, on the show notes page. If you're out and about listening to this, come on back to the show notes page. Click right on through to that. That's so amazing because reflecting back to something you had said before, if you're working in corporate or you're doing B2B, actually, if you're doing B2B at all and you can't figure out a way to land that $100,000 a year engagement, you're clearly missing an opportunity. So there's a bunch of them there, 7 of them right there. So thanks so much for that. That's terrific, Angelique. And thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of fun. And thank you for being with us on this episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria. Really, if you're in the B2B space, you should be considering corporate as one of the opportunities. If you're lost, go on through and take a look at Angelique and her team, the stuff they put together. I really think you can find some inspiration in that and get started on that path. So thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.